How much should you pay yourself when you run your own business? In today's episode of the Woman Owned podcast, we reveal the ultimate guide to paying yourself as a woman CEO. Don't go anywhere. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Woman Owned. I'm so glad you're here. And I just have to take a minute to really acknowledge and thank you for subscribing to the podcast and also for leaving us reviews. It's so much fun to log on week after week and see new reviews from amazing listeners around the world pouring in. I really appreciate you taking the time to do that. Getting consistent reviews and subscribers to the show is one of the main things that allows me to get this show out in front of as many women owners as possible. And as a collective, women owners and women entrepreneurs are really transforming how we look at success, how businesses are run from the inside out. So I really appreciate you joining me in this mission and helping me get this show out in front of other people. On to the business of today's episode, which really focuses on how much you should pay yourself when you run your own business. Over the course of the last 18 months in my coaching, in the free training that we do, and certainly in the conversations that we have inside our coaching programs, we are really doubling down on financial literacy, on understanding your numbers, not because we are trying to transform our CEOs and entrepreneurs into chief financial officers or their own accountants or bookkeepers, but because money and currency is an essential language of business. And when you speak it, the better you are able to run a profitable business, to employ really great growth strategies, and also to act as a partner with your directors of finance or your CFOs or your accountants or bookkeepers. So, a lot of you guys, and I hate to say this, but I will, a lot of you guys are really outsourcing financial decision making and putting accountants kind of quote unquote in charge of the money side of the business. And you're doing it because you don't have the financial empowerment that you need to be an effective CEO. And so I have seen this, I have been in your shoes if this is you. And so that's why we're really bringing much stronger financial acumen to the work that we do and also to some of the programming, such as here on the podcast. So, in this podcast, we are ultimately breaking down the ultimate guide to deciding what to pay yourself as a woman CEO. Now, this podcast, as the day that this is releasing, we are also releasing our most recent edition of the Woman Owned newsletter. If you are not a subscriber to the newsletter, I strongly suggest you do that because on today's newsletter, and if you subscribe, you're going to get your hands on this. You want to subscribe right away, though, before we issue our next newsletter, because we don't send them out retroactively. So if you are listening to this episode when it drops, you definitely want to go to safimedia.co/newsletter, safimedia.co/newsletter, because inside that you are going to see we went out and surveyed 15 women entrepreneurs about how much they pay themselves. And we asked them, what's your revenue? How do you pay yourself? And how do you take that money? And we have those results published in the newsletter. So I just find it's always really interesting to see how our peers are doing it. And you're going to see that we've got women entrepreneurs ranging from 200K to 2 million plus. We're showing a complete breakdown of their compensation. So you definitely want to go and get your hands on that, safimedia.co/newsletter. It's a really good companion to what I'm going to teach you in this episode. So let's get down to business. How much should you pay yourself when you run your own business? And the honest answer is as much as you dang well want to. And truly, as a woman owner, you get 100% autonomy to decide what you're going to pay yourself each year. The challenge, of course, is that you also have 100% autonomy to overpay yourself or underpay yourself or mismanage capital, thereby starving your company of the money it needs to grow and or assuring yourself of a pauper's retirement. Therefore, if you are scaling from 200K to 2 million plus, you may find that you need a better and more consistently applied rationale as it relates to your compensation than simply I pay myself whatever I want. And of course, if you're just happy paying yourself whatever you want and it works for you, fill your boots. But if you are scaling, you want to practice really good financial management in your business and you want a rationale that you can apply consistently, then this is really key. And I will say, in June, we ran a full day workshop called Asset Class. And this was primarily for the clients that we work with, although they were able to bring a guest to the asset class event. And asset class was a full day workshop focused exclusively on how you can turn your business not just from something that provides you with a good living, but something that becomes a wealth generating machine. And when it comes to wealth generation, one of the biggest ways that entrepreneurs generate wealth is when they sell their businesses. And if you decide to sell your business, having things set up properly, having a strong rationale about what your compensation is and why your compensation is such, these are the things that are really going to help you have clean, solid books, which are absolutely critical if you want to attract and retain a good buyer for your company. So this is, here at the Woman Owned podcast, we're not just teaching you little ninja hacks that you can, that get you some money tomorrow. We are really teaching you strategies that you can use to generate long-term wealth with the business. To help you do your internal math, to sort of give you some guidelines to start to think about how to pay yourself, we created the ultimate guide to deciding what to pay yourself as a woman CEO. And again, you can listen to it here on the podcast, but if you want to have it in written format, which is often, that's what you're going to want to print out and keep. If you're going to want to see how other women entrepreneurs are paying themselves, I strongly encourage you to get the written report of this, which you can by going to safimedia.co/newsletter, and you will get our most recent issue that has the ultimate guide to paying yourself as a woman CEO embedded inside that newsletter issue. Now, before we get into the specific details of how to figure out how much to pay yourself, I think it's critical that we first cover a few key money principles that every woman owner needs to know. So, principle number one is that businesses need fuel to grow, and that fuel is cash. Early on in your business, you probably worked for free or for a percentage of the salary you'd make working for somebody else. So before I started my business, I had like a secondment, and I can remember with a federal government agency. And I remember my assigned salary at the time, I think it was like maybe $80,000 a year or something like this. This is like going back 20 years. When I started my business, my salary was not $80,000 a year. And it wasn't a secondment. It was a contract that I was doing. I was working for the federal government, and that was sort of the assigned salary that they'd given me. When I started my own business, I was not making $80,000 a year. I was not paying myself $80,000 a year. I took a pay cut to work for my business. And therefore I worked for a percentage of the salary I would have made working for somebody else. And the money that I saved by underpaying myself went directly to giving my company the money it needed to grow, right? So you're not paying yourself a full salary. You're taking the money you would pay yourself and you're keeping it in the business so that you can, buy the supplies that you need. So you can travel to attend the networking events. So you can pay your dues and professional associations you may be a part of, et cetera, et cetera. So this is very common early on in the business, but as your company matures, you are not only going to ideally start paying yourself more, but you will often take a share of your profits and reinvest that money back into growth. So you may find that you take some of the extra cash that you have and you hire a team member so that you can free up your time and focus more on sales and marketing. The idea is that and this is a fundamental concept that sometimes entrepreneurs overlook, that what businesses eat, to keep growing is money. As I'm about to point out, any money that you take out of the business to pay yourself is money that the business doesn't have to fuel continued growth. So this is a constant give and take that you will need to balance as you scale. So as you decide that it's time to start paying yourself more, you're taking money out of the business, and resources are finite, right? So the money that you take out of the business is money that the business does not have to grow. And so most founders are continuously navigating this dance. between building their own personal nest egg and making sure their company has the money that it needs to grow. And ideally, you want to be creating a business where both are possible at the same time. And lots of entrepreneurs have that in terms of absolute numbers, but in terms of proportionally, not a lot do, right? So I want you to be in that category of entrepreneur who is able to have a well-financed business that has the money that it needs to keep growing, the fuel that it needs to keep growing. And I want you to be a well-financed woman who personally has the fuel that you need to feel protected, to feel secure, to be able to weather challenges, and to be able to have an abundant life. So principle number 2 is that your personal financial health and your company's financial health are related, but they are not the same thing. So this is really key because if your company does 500K per year with 250K in expenses, and you pay yourself a 250K salary, your company therefore has zero profit and is therefore not technically healthy. Right? If a company has no profit, it's not technically a healthy company. Meanwhile, let's say that you're paying yourself 250K a year, you're managing your income, you're living below your means, you're therefore able to save and bank money, then this is an example of how you may be financially healthy, but your business is not financially healthy. And this often happens in the reverse as well. Now, again, I hesitate to say this is bad. It's simply something to be aware of and to work toward. And the thing that we're trying to work toward is the eventuality that both you and your business are financially healthy independently and together. Now, this is not bad. I don't like to label things good or bad, but it's simply something to be aware of and work toward. And the thing you're working toward is the eventuality that both you and your business are financially healthy, both separately, like independently and together. And here's how I define a financially healthy business. Number one, you as the owner are paying yourself at minimum a fair market salary. I'm going to get into what a fair market salary is here in a moment. I mean, that is the focus of this conversation. Number two, you have a 15% plus profit margin. Number three, your taxes are set aside ahead of time. And number four, you have 2 to 3 months of operating expenses in cash. And again, go to safimedia.co/newsletter if you want this in written form, you want the actual report, so you can reference it again and again. Now, with these two critical principles in place, let's proceed with our ultimate guide on how much to pay yourself as a woman CEO. Okay, so first we're going to break down the 3 components of a woman owner's compensation. So CEOs are generally compensated with a mix of the following. Number one, a base salary. So this is what shows up on your pay stub. So if you have like a team and you have, you're issuing regular payments, et cetera, your pay stub would show your base salary. This is what you get paid every 2 weeks or so, like any other employee. The next component are owner distributions. Now, if you are a CEO at Walmart, you're going to get things like bonuses. Small business owners generally get owner distributions, and owner distributions are typically calculated periodically and usually depend on how profitable your company is, and the tax regime in your country or province or state. So there are lots of nuances in terms of taking money out of your company in a tax effective way. So for instance, in some countries or some jurisdictions, CEOs will just take their salary like they'll take a certain base salary and no more, because that's where they sort of max out their tax benefits, and then they will employ other techniques to get compensated from their company in a more tax effective way. But that's owner distributions, right? So how much it is, how frequently you take them, and there's going to be nuances that are dependent, on what makes most sense from a tax perspective based on where you live. And then the third part is equity. And this is your ownership stake in the company. Now, this is a long-term compensation, and you only realize it when you sell your firm. So if you think about this, your base salary, that's like getting paid consistently. Owner distributions are often taken periodically. Could be monthly, could be at quarterly, could be every 6 months or annually. And then equity, this is something that you realize in the long term if and when you sell your company. So those are like the 3 main components of an owner's compensation. So let's talk about how you calculate your base salary. Now, I just want to point out that it often takes months or even years to get your business to a place where you can pay yourself a consistent fair market salary. There has been research that has showed up to 50% of all entrepreneurs have gone 6 months or more without paying themselves anything at all while they were paying other team members, right? And so, if you are not paying yourself consistently yet, don't fret. We want to get to that point 100% because you want your business to be financially healthy and you want yourself to be financially healthy. But getting into the blame game or feeling bad about it will not help you. So, your goal as soon as possible is to have your company be in a position to pay you a fair market salary. But how do you calculate a fair market salary? Now, there's no science to this. It is definitely more of an art, but I want to share some guidelines with you. So, the first thing that you want to do is to identify the one job you do in your company most in addition to being a CEO. Okay. Then you're going to Google average salary plus that job title. And what we're going to come out with is basically what you'd have. You're usually going to be a CEO plus something else, you know? So I'm like a CEO plus a marketer, a CEO plus a salesperson. You know what I'm saying? So you're going to choose CEO plus executive coach, CEO plus social media manager. I'm going to use that as an example. Let's say you own your own company and you own a boutique social media agency. Therefore, you are first a CEO, but you are also a social media manager. So you'd then go and look up fair market salaries for social media managers. And you'd probably adjust for where your location is and what your company size is. So for instance, if you're a social media manager based in New York City, you're working for HubSpot, you have 30 people working under you, you can expect to be paid more than a social media strategist who's working for a 3-person company in Charlottetown, PEI. All right. So, according to Glassdoor, the average salary for a social media manager working in Canada is $53,000. Okay. So, you can use this as a base salary. And Glassdoor is a pretty good place to start getting basic average salaries for a role. So, 53K, that is your fair market salary for one of your jobs. But remember, it's not your only job. You're also a CEO. So, we need to figure out and remember, you're not a full-time CEO. In fact, companies under 2 million do not need full-time CEOs. So you're probably only a CEO like 1 to 2 days a week, right? Is when you're acting as a CEO. So then we need to figure out how do we compensate for that? What I would generally do here is I would again Google average salary and then I would Google general manager. And then we're going to take a portion of whatever you come up with there and add it to your base salary. So this needs some explanation. So as I've stated, a company under 2 million does not technically need a full-time visionary CEO. Does it need a visionary CEO? Yes, but that part of your job is probably only going to take you 1 to 2 days a week because under 2 million, you're still working in the business consistently. The business probably can't afford to not have you doing that. So what a business of that size mostly needs is a general manager with strong vision. I know I'm going to take some heat for this, but it's my honest opinion. You're not running a company with global significance and global impact yet. You are building a small business. Therefore, your job as a CEO is best described as a general manager. And what's more, you don't even do that job 5 days a week because you've got other jobs. So let's go back to our example. Our social media agency owner, she Googles average salary plus general manager and finds that the average salary for a general manager is 90K. She's going to take about 25% of that because she's going to say, okay, I'm spending about a quarter of my time as a CEO or as a general manager. So I'm going to take a quarter of that salary. That's $22,500. Okay. So 25% of 90K is 22,500. So now we've got two pieces of information. We have your general manager salary, your CEO salary, which is 22,500, and you get that for being a CEO about a day a week. And then you have the role that you work inside the business. In our example, it's a social media manager, and that was about 53,000. So she adds those both together and she gets 75,500. And that's sort of an initial penciled in number for what she should be paying herself. Now, what's very interesting is when we were really taking a look at how much women owners are paying themselves, very few women owners who were generating under 750,000 paid themselves much more in salary than 80,000 was very typical. I don't not sure how you feel about that number, but that's sort of your rough working number. But from there, the next thing you're going to do is you're going to basically adjust that. So you're going to take a look at that and you're going to ask yourself, can I live off this? Do I need to make any adjustments? And the idea in an ideal world, you are able to live off your base salary. And that anything you take later in terms of owner distributions or anything like that, that really helps you to build a nest egg and build wealth. But in an ideal situation, I would want you to be able to live off the base salary that you pay yourself. Okay, that's just a great rule of thumb. And of course, because of different tax situations, you may find that paying yourself a base salary that is reasonable, but is not massive, can be very helpful in terms of tax benefits. And then again, there's lots of other ways that you can take income in a tax efficient manner. And this is where, more advanced accountants and that kind of thing can help you in a way that's very unique to your situation. But whatever number you come up with, in my example, it's 75,500. That's your base salary. You divide that by 26, and that's what you're paying yourself every 2 weeks for the entire year. All right. So that's calculating base salary. That's the first number. Now, the next part is where you get to calculate your owner distributions. So, one of the biggest benefits of owning a business is that you get to take owner distributions. And I really see owner distributions as payback for all the income you may not have taken as you were building your business. But also remember that in a capitalist society, capital, money, is a tool that we use to create growth. And in general, capital is rewarded more generously than labor in a capitalist society, right? Labor is compensated to one level. When you use your labor to make money, you're compensated at one level. When you use your money to make money, you're compensated at another level. Because the idea is that you take the money you have and you risk it to get more. And what we will typically see using capital to make more money in a capitalist society, capital gets the bigger rewards. Okay. It's why you often see the rich getting richer and why a lot of governments' attempts to tax the ultra wealthy fail, because these governments are working inside capitalist societies where the foundation of a capitalist society is capital, which is rewarded more significantly than labor. I could get into this. You may like it or not like it. I'm just kind of pointing out, the bigger picture here and how it works. So as a business owner, you are also compensated based on the capital that you put at risk and what we often look at as owner distributions. And so this is where you get to decide how much, in addition to your base salary, you're going to take on a monthly, quarterly, or annual basis over and above that base salary. Now, if you follow Mike Michalowicz's Profit First model, you're going to decide this number ahead of time and take it out. And I'm not going to get into that. Go read the book. It's excellent. We have a lot of clients who follow that. If you follow more traditional finance models, you're going to take a percentage of what is left over after you pay all your bills, i.e., you're going to take a percentage of your profits. Now, here are some guidelines. We have seen people take anywhere from 3%, 5%, or 10% right off the top of their monthly, quarterly, or quarterly gross earnings, right? So if they made $100,000 in Q2, they might take 10,000 right off the top and put it right into owner distributions. Right? That's an example. So that's one example. People just take a percentage right off the top, and we've seen 3%, 5%, 10%. Then another way to look at this is they just put their profits into a special account, and then each quarter they're going to take a percentage of those. And we've seen anywhere from 5% to 80%. So entrepreneurs are taking anywhere from 5 to 80% of those profits that they've banked, and they're doing that on a quarterly basis. So as you can see, you can basically take as much as you want. And as the amount you take goes up, make sure that you're consulting with tax professionals to ensure you're optimizing on how that money is taken out of your company. But I would not only talk to tax professionals, I would also talk to other wealthy entrepreneurs about how they're doing it. Okay. I think it's really, really critical that you start to build relationships with people and have frank conversations with them about money. Example, in my example, I live off my base salary and I put my owner distributions into investment accounts that are owned by a holding company that I have. And that's the most tax effective way for me to take that income. But again, the thing is here, I want to remind you that I know that any money that I take out of the business, that business doesn't have to grow. And for me, yeah, it's very important that we continue to grow our business, that we continue to make sure our business has the capital that it needs to grow. So I always balance how much I take and how much I compensate myself with what does the business need. All right. Again, you want to make sure that you go back to the beginning of this episode where I start to talk about what a financially healthy business really looks like. From here, you get to determine your total compensation. So your total compensation is going to be your base salary plus your owner distribution, and that gives you your total compensation. Now, let's say you have that and you want to have more money next year. So you're like, this is great. I paid myself $125,000 this year, which is awesome. And I want to pay myself, 200K next year. Number one, could you just take that? Sure. If the business has it, you can just take it for sure. But again, if you want to apply consistent rationale, then think about this. In the real world, well, I don't know, but in the ideal world, people don't get paid more for doing the exact same job. In a capitalist based company, people get paid more for driving stronger results and profits. So if as an owner you want to get paid more, here's what you need to do. You need to grow the company so that your base pay increases as your responsibility increases, or you make your company more profitable so that you can increase the amount you take in owner distributions. So the first strategy is really about growing the total pie. And then the second strategy is really about cutting costs to increase the profitability of the company that you have. And if you do both those things, you're really ticking, right? And then the final pieces of compensation is, of course, equity. It's your ownership stake. And one of the biggest forms of compensation a woman owner can generate is the sale of her company. Now, it's beyond the scope of this guide, the idea of building your company to sell, but always keep this in mind. And you could 2x, 3x, or even 5x or more the total combined multi-year compensation you earned via your base salary and owner distributions. So that's the power of being a woman owner, right? Is that, let's say you own your business for 10 years and you just calculate how much you pay yourself each of those 10 years. If you set up your business to sell, you could 2x, 3x, or even 5x or more the total combined compensation you took from your company over the course of that 10 years. That is the power. That is the power of ownership. To sum up, my goal with this episode was not to paint you a super black and white picture of exactly how much to pay yourself. Rather, it was to equip you with some timeless principles to help you think critically about your own compensation. I really hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, hit me up on social. You can find me on LinkedIn, on Instagram at Eleanor Beaton. Subscribe to the woman-owned newsletter, safimedia.co/newsletter, where you can get the actual guide and you can see a breakdown of 15 women entrepreneurs and how much they paid themselves, how much money their companies make, and how they take that income, plus tons more additional resources, case studies, all that good stuff. The woman-owned newsletter is the world's only newsletter focused exclusively on women scaling from 200K to 2 million plus. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you. Hope you got a lot out of this episode, and we will see you back here next week.